There are 10 million people in Jakarta. We're 10 million. I woke up on a Tuesday morning in my apartment on the 14th floor, and every single one of them was gone. No bodies, no wreckage, no evacuation, just an entire city running perfectly power on, water flowing, traffic lights cycling, with no one left inside it. No one except me. It took me 3 days to understand why they took everyone and missed me. It took me 5 days to learn what they'd become. And it took me 7 days, alone, with something knocking on my door each night and calling me by name, to find out what had woken up beneath the city and what it wanted from the last mind still making noise. What I heard through that radio still haunts me. What it offered me, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tempted. This is the full account of my 19 days alone in a sealed city, and why I'm still fighting to stay awake. Let me tell you how it actually began. The morning I realized I was alone, I was brushing my teeth. That's the detail that stays with me, the ordinariness of it. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror in my apartment on the 14th floor. Foam on my lips, the electric toothbrush buzzing against my molars, and outside the window, Jakarta stretched in every direction under a pale sky. 10 million people, and not a single sound. No traffic, no muezzin calling the dawn prayer. No roosters from the kampung settlement below. No honking, no motorbike engines stuttering to life. No distant thrum of the city waking up the way it had every single morning for the 6 years I'd lived here. I spat into the sink and turned off the toothbrush, and the silence hit me the way cold water hits bare skin. Total, absolute. The kind of silence that makes you think you've gone deaf until you hear your own heartbeat proving otherwise. My name is Crosby Hale. I'm 47 years old. I was an infrastructure consultant for a Dutch-funded water treatment project in East Jakarta, 6 years on a rolling contract. Always 6 months from going home to Perth, never quite getting there. I had a cat named Biscuit, a half-finished model of the HMAS Sydney I'd been building for 3 years at my kitchen table, and a routine that had kept me sane through the loneliness of being the only Australian on a team of 30. That routine broke on March 12th. The night before had been normal. I'd eaten nasi goreng from the warung on the corner, watched a documentary about deep-sea mining on my laptop, fallen asleep by 11. Nothing strange. No alerts on my phone, no emergency broadcast, no neighbor pounding on my door. I'd slept through whatever happened. And when I opened my eyes at 5:40 in the morning, the world had already ended around me. I stood at my window. Below, the street was empty. Not the way it's empty at 3 in the morning. This was sterile empty. Cars parked along the curb, motorbikes leaning on their stands, but nothing moving. No stray dogs picking through garbage. No cats on the warm hoods of cars. The warung's metal shutter was closed. The security guard's chair outside my building was vacant, his thermos still sitting on the concrete beside it. I checked my phone. No signal. Not weak signal, 0 bars. The Wi-Fi was connected to my router, but nothing loaded. I tried to call my ex-wife in Melbourne. Nothing. Tried my project manager, Hendarto. Nothing. Tried emergency services. Dead air that didn't even ring. For the first hour, I told myself power outage. I told myself coincidence. I told myself that the whole neighborhood had evacuated for some reason and I'd slept through the warning. And any minute, someone would come back for me. My hands found things to do filling the kettle, packing a bag with water bottles and my passport, feeding Biscuit her morning portion. She ate normally. She didn't seem distressed. Animals know things. The fact that she was calm made me more uneasy, not less, because it meant whatever happened hadn't made noise. By 7, I was dressed and in the stairwell. The elevator was working. The power was on throughout the building, but I took the stairs because something in me didn't want to be trapped in a metal box. 14 flights down. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. Every landing I passed, I stopped and listened. Nothing. Not a television murmuring behind a door, not a baby crying, not a toilet flushing. The lobby was empty. The building had 140 units, 600 people roughly. The front desk was unmanned. The logbook was open to March 11th, the last entry from the security guard at 22:15. Pak Arman, Tamu Keluar. Guest departed. Nothing after that. I stepped outside. The air was warm and still, carrying the faint smell of jasmine from the small garden in the median. The street stretched both directions, Jalan Cempaka Putih Raya, and I could see maybe 300 meters before the road curved. Empty, utterly empty. No bodies, no wreckage, no signs of panic, just absence. I walked to the corner. The traffic light was cycling red, yellow, green, red, yellow, green, obediently directing nothing. Across the intersection, a grab bike was parked with its engine off, the rider's green jacket draped over the seat. I touched the jacket. Dry, room temperature. It told me nothing. For the first 3 hours, I walked. I covered maybe 6 kilometers in a widening spiral from my apartment, moving through streets I'd driven 1,000 times. Cempaka Putih, Kemayoran, into the edges of central Jakarta. I saw no one. I called out. My voice hit buildings and came back. I tried store doors, many were unlocked. Inside a mini-mart, the lights were on, the refrigerator humming, yogurt and tea bottles still cold behind the glass. The register was closed. No money missing. No signs of looting. Behind the counter, a half-eaten bowl of Indomie sat with a plastic fork still in it. That detail froze me. Someone had been eating. Mid-bite. And then they were gone. I took water and protein bars from the shelves, not because I was thinking about survival yet, but because my hands needed something to carry. I kept walking, past a school with its gates locked and playground empty, past a row of shophouses with laundry hanging motionless on third-floor balconies, past a mosque where the sound system's green power light was on, waiting for a voice that wouldn't come. By noon, I was standing at the edge of Merdeka Square, the vast open space at the heart of Jakarta, the national monument rising white and gold in the center. The park surrounding it was green and still. The fountain near the north entrance was running, water arcing in programmed patterns. And I was the only living thing in sight. Not a bird, not a rat, not even insects, which I only noticed when I sat on a bench and realized nothing was buzzing around the overflowing trash bins nearby. I want to tell you I was brave. I want to tell you I had a plan. What I actually did was sit on that bench for 45 minutes, staring at the monument, my hands trembling so badly I couldn't open the water bottle I'd taken. Because the silence at that scale, the silence of a city built for 10 million, with infrastructure running and lights on and water flowing, but no life occupying any of it, that silence does something to the inside of your chest. It's not fear exactly. It's the sensation of reality pulling away from you, like a tide. I thought about Biscuit, alone in the apartment. That brought me back. I had one living thing depending on me. That was enough. I walked back. It took 2 hours, because I stopped at every sound. A shutter clanking in a breeze, a car alarm going off 4 streets away, and then stopping, a pipe somewhere groaning. Each time my pulse spiked. Each time, it was nothing alive. When I got back to my building, I noticed something I'd missed that morning. On the wall of the lobby, near the mailboxes, someone had written in what looked like red marker, "Jangan tinggal di dalam." Don't stay inside. The handwriting was hurried but legible. I hadn't seen it when I left because the light in that corner had been off. Now the overhead fluorescent was on, flickering slightly, illuminating the message. Don't stay inside. Inside what? The building. The city. I went upstairs, fed Biscuit, drank a liter of water, ate one of the protein bars. Then I did what any engineer does when the situation exceeds comprehension. I made a list. What I knew. Everyone was gone. Animals were gone. Power and water infrastructure was still running, which meant automated systems were intact. No bodies, no signs of violence or disease. My own health seemed normal. The timeline was sometime between 22:15 the previous night and 05:40 this morning. What I didn't know, everything else. I tried the radio. I had a small shortwave set I'd bought years ago, a Texun PL680, something I'd used to pick up Australian broadcasts when homesickness got bad. I scanned frequencies for 2 hours. Every band was empty. Not static, clean empty, the way a frequency sounds when the transmitters are powered, but no one is speaking. Carrier waves humming on Indonesian state radio frequencies. FM stations broadcasting dead air. Nothing on HF, nothing on SW. I found one anomaly, at 7.245 megahertz, a steady repeating tone. 3 short pulses, pause, 3 short pulses, pause. Not Morse, just a rhythm, mechanical, automated. I wrote down the frequency and the time. That first night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with every light on, Biscuit on my lap, listening to that repeating tone on the shortwave and watching the city through my window. Jakarta's skyline glittered the way it always did, office towers lit floor by floor, the red warning lights on construction cranes blinking, the green glow of mosque domes. A city performing normalcy for an audience of 1. Around 2 in the morning, I saw movement. Not a person, not an animal. A light in a building across the highway, maybe a kilometer away. A residential tower, 30 floors. One window on the 22nd floor went from dark to lit. Then, 30 seconds later, back to dark. Then lit again. A pattern. On for 3 seconds, off for 2, on for 3, off for 2. Someone was signaling. My whole body went rigid. I stood up, pressing my face to the glass. The pattern continued as steady, deliberate, unmistakably intentional. I grabbed a flashlight from my emergency drawer and aimed it at my own window. I flashed back. On 3, off 2, on 3, off 2, matching their rhythm. The light across the highway stopped, went dark for 10 full seconds. Then resumed faster now, frantic. And then it died completely. I watched that window for 3 hours. It never came back on. Day 2, I went looking. I had to. Not just because of the signal, but because the waiting was worse than moving. I packed a bag water, food, flashlight, multi-tool, first aid kit, my shortwave radio, a paper map of Jakarta I'd kept in my desk drawer. I left extra food and water for Biscuit, propped the bathroom door open so she could get to the toilet bowl if she needed more. Then I walked. The building I'd seen the signal from was the Temrin Residences, a complex I knew vaguely. Getting there meant crossing the Jakarta Inner Ring Road, a 10-lane elevated highway that was normally a river of brake lights and diesel fumes. Now it was a parking lot of abandoned vehicles, doors closed, some with engines still ticking in the heat. I walked between them, looking in windows. Empty, all empty. One sedan had a child's car seat in the back, a stuffed rabbit lying on it, I didn't look at that one long. The Temrin lobby was more upscale than mine. Marble floors, a dead fountain in the center, the smell of air conditioning still cycling. I found the elevator bank and rode up to 22. The hallway was carpeted, doors numbered in brass. I tried to remember which window I'd seen the light from, calculated based on the building's orientation. Unit 2207. The door was closed. I knocked. Nothing. Knocked harder. Called out in English and then in my rough Indonesian. Nothing. I tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, a 2-bedroom apartment, well furnished. Expensive art on the walls, a bookshelf full of economics texts in English and Bahasa. And on the table by the window, facing my direction, a flashlight, standing upright, switched to the on position. Its beam was aimed at the ceiling. No one was there. But there were signs. A glass of water on the kitchen counter, half full. A laptop open on the desk, powered but showing only a login screen. And on the dining table, next to the flashlight, a spiral notebook open to a page covered in handwriting. Indonesian. My reading is better than my speaking, but it took me time. The handwriting was tight, controlled at the top, increasingly erratic toward the bottom. The top line read, Hari Pertama, Sendirian, Day 1, alone. What followed was a log. Whoever lived here, the notebook's inside cover said, Department of N. Wibowo. Had woken yesterday morning to the same emptiness I had. Their account was similar to mine. No one, no bodies, no animals. Power running. They'd spent the day searching the building, found no one, tried phones, tried internet, tried radio. Nothing. Then the bottom third of the page. The handwriting falling apart. Mereka kembali di malam hari. Mereka tidak sama. Jangan biarkan mereka melihatmu bergerak. They come back at night. They are not the same. Don't let them see you move. I read that line 4 times. My mouth went dry. I looked at the flashlight on the table, still burning. Someone had been here, had seen my signal, had signaled back. And then what? Left? Been taken? The apartment was undisturbed, no struggle, no blood. Just absence, like everywhere else. I took the notebook. I took the flashlight. And I left that apartment with my skin crawling in a way that had nothing to do with the heat. Back on the street, I looked at the sky. Mid-afternoon, probably 6 hours of daylight left. They come back at night. Whatever that meant, if it meant anything. If Wibowo hadn't been losing his mind. I did not want to be caught in the open after dark. I walked fast back toward my building. But I took a different route. And that's how I found the hospital. RSUP Persahabatan. A major public hospital, 8 stories, East Jakarta. I hadn't planned to enter it. But as I passed, I noticed the emergency department doors were open, and the lights inside were on, and there was something on the ground just inside the entrance. Shoes, dozens of them, scattered across the floor of the emergency waiting room, sandals, sneakers, high heels, children's shoes. As if people had been sitting in those plastic chairs and simply left their footwear behind when they vanished. The shoes were arranged in no pattern. Some upright, some on their sides, some in pairs, some separated. I've seen natural disaster sites. I've seen flood damage across entire districts. I've walked through infrastructure failures where water systems collapsed and people died of cholera. This was worse than all of that, because there was nothing to point at and say this is what happened. Just shoes on the floor and a silence so deep I could hear the fluorescent tubes buzzing above me. I didn't go deeper into the hospital. I couldn't. Whatever was in there, whatever had happened to the people wearing those shoes, I wasn't ready. If you're still with me, leave a comment and tell me what you would have done with 6 hours of daylight left and that notebook in your bag. Now, let me tell you what happened when the sun went down. I made it back to my building by 5, barricaded my apartment door with a dining table, closed every curtain, turned off every light. I sat in my bedroom closet with Biscuit, the shortwave radio on low, a kitchen knife in my hand that I knew was useless but couldn't put down. The city went dark gradually. Not all at once, Jakarta's grid is sectored, and the automated systems bring street lights on in stages as photosensors registered dusk. From my closet, I couldn't see outside, but I could hear the faint click of the building's corridor lights engaging through the wall. Everything working normally, infrastructure humming along without its operators. At 8:17, the shortwave tone changed. The repeating 3-pulse signal I'd been hearing on 7.245 megahertz shifted. Same frequency, but now it was broadcasting something different. A long tone, steady, unbroken, like an alarm that never cycled. I pressed the radio to my ear and listened. 30 seconds, a minute. Then it cut, and in the gap of silence before the tone resumed, I heard breathing. Not mine, not Biscuit's. In the radio, someone breathing into a microphone on that frequency. Slow, steady, not distressed, just breathing, like they were listening back. I didn't transmit. I had no way to the tech, soon as receive only. I sat there in the dark, in my closet, hearing someone breathe at me from somewhere in this dead city. And I didn't move. Biscuit's ears were flat. She pressed against my thigh and didn't make a sound. Then the breathing stopped. The 3-pulse tone resumed. At 9, I heard the first sound from outside. Not a normal sound. Not footsteps or voices or traffic. A sound like the closest I can describe it is like fabric being dragged over concrete. A susurrant, continuous whisper of friction, coming from below, from street level. I stayed in the closet. I didn't look. I pressed my hand over Biscuit's body and felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The sound moved. I could track it through the building's walls, not inside the building, but along the exterior, moving north to south. It lasted perhaps 3 minutes. Then it faded and didn't return. At 11, something tried my door. Not knocking, testing. The handle depressed slowly, hit the lock, released, then depressed again. Then a third time, slow, patient, mechanical in its regularity. 3 attempts, each identical. Then silence. I didn't breathe. Biscuit didn't breathe. We sat in that closet like stones. Nothing else happened until dawn. I know because I watched the time on my phone, no signal, but the clock still working crawl from 23:14 to 05:40 without another sound. When gray light started seeping through the curtains, I uncurled from the closet with my legs cramping and my back screaming. And I looked out the window. The street below looked the same. Parked cars, empty sidewalks, traffic lights cycling. But something was different, and it took me a full minute to identify what. The security guard's thermos, the one that had been sitting beside his empty chair yesterday morning, was gone. Day 3. I knew I couldn't stay. Whatever was happening at night, whatever had come for Wibowo, whatever had tried my door, whatever was breathing into that radio frequency, it was aware of occupied spaces. It had tried my door, specifically my door, in a building of 140 units. It knew I was there. I spent the daylight hours preparing. I needed a vehicle, a route out of the city, and supplies. The vehicle was easy. The parking garage below my building had dozens of cars and motorbikes. And I knew from previous floods that many residents left keys in their vehicles for quick evacuation. I found a Toyota Fortuner on the second basement level. Keys in the center console, 3/4 of a tank. I loaded it with water from the building's ground floor storage room, canned food from the mini-mart, my tools, my radio, the notebook, and Biscuit in her carrier. The route was harder. Jakarta's road network is designed for a city of 10 million, which means the main arteries are wide enough to move. But getting out of the city entirely meant heading east toward Bekasi or south toward Bogor in either case. At least 30 kilometers of urban sprawl before anything resembling open country. I chose south, toward the mountains, toward higher ground, cooler air, fewer buildings, and the irrational but powerful sense that elevation meant safety. I left at 2 in the afternoon, calculating I'd have 3.5 hours of solid daylight, plus another hour of twilight. Plenty of time to clear the city if the roads were passable. They were not. The toll road south the Jagorawi was blocked within 4 kilometers, not by vehicles, by something else. The road surface was intact, the lane markings bright and clear. But across the entire width of the highway, from barrier to barrier, the road was covered in a substance I'd never seen before. Dark, viscous. Not oil, it had no sheen. Not water, it didn't flow. It sat on the asphalt like a living mat, maybe 3 centimeters thick, stretching as far ahead as I could see. I stopped the Fortuner 50 meters back, got out, walked closer. The smell reached me at 30 meters, not rot, not chemical, something organic. Wet earth and copper and something else underneath, something my brain couldn't categorize. At 20 meters, I could see that the surface of the substance wasn't still. It moved. Slowly. A gentle undulation, like a calm sea breathing in sleep. I didn't touch it. I didn't cross it. I got back in the truck and turned around. I tried Jalan Raya Bogor, the surface road running parallel. Blocked. Same substance, pooled across the intersection where the road passed under the toll bridge. I tried cutting through Pasar Minggu. Blocked. Every route south was sealed. I turned east, toward Bekasi, toward the coast. Jalan Raya Bekasi was clear for 8 kilometers. I made good time, weaving between parked vehicles, heart hammering, watching the sun. Then, near Kakung, the road simply ended, not blocked by the substance this time. The road was there. But beyond a certain point, the city just faded. The buildings became indistinct, the road markings blurred. It was like driving into a photograph that hadn't finished rendering. My eyes couldn't focus on what was ahead. My brain refused to process it. I stopped the truck and sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at something my vision couldn't hold. I reversed, tried north. Same phenomenon around Tanjung Priok. Near the port, the world lost resolution. West, near Tangerang. Same thing. The city had edges now, boundaries, and I was inside them. Jakarta wasn't just empty. It was sealed. I drove back to my building, parked in the basement, carried Biscuit upstairs. 3:15. Still daylight, still time. I sat at my kitchen table and opened Wibowo's notebook to the second page, which I hadn't read yet. It was dated the same as the first day one, but continued on the back. More collected now, as if written earlier in the day. Notes about what he'd observed. Wibowo was methodical. He'd been an economist, I gathered, and he'd approached this like a data set. Observations, translated roughly. City infrastructure automated. Backup generators cycling on schedule. Water pressure nominal. No evidence of rapid evacuation. Personal items, food, vehicles all left in place. No evidence of disease, no bodies, no contamination markers. Population removal was instantaneous or near instantaneous. Window, 2200 to 500 based on last known activity. Building security log showing occupant entry at 2241. Then, on a new line. I am not the only one left. There are others, but they are not awake during the day. I saw one at the window of the apartment across from mine, standing motionless, facing inward. I called to them. They did not respond. They did not move. Eyes open, standing. I put the notebook down. My hands were shaking. I went to my window, looked at the building across the street, a low-rise, 5 stories, residential. Looked at every window I could see. Nothing, no faces, no figures, just curtains and glass. But Wibowo had seen them, standing, facing inward, eyes open. They come back at night. They are not the same. I think I'd known, on some level, since the hospital, since the shoes. People don't just vanish, they go somewhere. And if their shoes are left behind, it means whatever took them didn't care about shoes, didn't need shoes, because shoes are for walking. And maybe what came back didn't walk the way we do. Sunset came at 6:12. I watched it from my window, everything in me pulled tight. I'd moved the barricade back against the door. Every light was off. Biscuit was in her carrier, zipped shut, silent. I stood at the edge of the curtain and looked down at the street and waited. At 6:40, in the gray post-sunset light, I saw the first one. It came from inside the building across the street. The front door opened, not forcefully, just opened, as if someone had walked to it and pushed the handle and a figure stepped out. A person. The shape of a person, average height, wearing what looked like ordinary clothes, moving slowly, deliberately, out onto the sidewalk. Then another, and another, from the same building, from the one beside it, from shops and offices and apartments up and down the street. Dozens, then hundreds. They emerged in silence, walking in that same slow, deliberate way, spreading across the road, filling the intersection. In the fading light, I couldn't see faces clearly, but I could see enough. They didn't interact with each other, didn't speak, didn't touch. They moved in the same direction north, away from my window, in a broad, slow migration. Their footsteps made no sound. Not because they were quiet, but because they weren't touching the ground the way people should. Their feet contacted the asphalt, but produced no impact, no friction sound. Like watching a video with the audio stripped. I counted for as long as I could see them. Over 100 passed in 3 minutes. Then the light was gone, and they were shapes in darkness. And I pulled back from the window because I remembered what Wibowo had written. Don't let them see you move. I lay on my bedroom floor in total darkness. The shortwave was off. I didn't want any sound, any light, anything that might signal occupancy. Biscuit was silent in her carrier. The knife was in my hand again. The door handle that had been tested the previous night was now behind a dining table, 2 chairs, and the refrigerator I'd dragged across in the last hour of daylight. At 9:30, the sound came again. The fabric on concrete sound, but louder now, not passing along the exterior of the building. This time, it was in the corridor, on my floor. It moved past my door, slowly, that dragging whisper. It took maybe 15 seconds to pass. I didn't breathe. I felt Biscuit frozen still inside the carrier beside me. The sound moved on, faded toward the stairwell, was gone. 20 minutes later, it came back. Same direction, same speed. Past my door, gone. It did this 8 times through the night. 8 circuits, like a patrol. I lay on that floor for 10 hours. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I watched ceiling shadows shift as the moon traversed its arc. and I thought about the model of the HMAS Sydney on my kitchen table, half-built, waiting for my hands. I thought about the hull pieces I'd already cemented together, the tiny gun turrets still in their sprue, the paint bottles I'd ordered from a shop in Glebe that took 6 weeks to reach Jakarta. I thought about how the whole project had been an excuse to use my hands when my mind wouldn't quiet. 3 years of it, never rushed, never complete. The kind of thing you keep unfinished because finishing it means you have to find a new reason to sit still. Dawn came. The sound stopped. I waited until full light before moving. Then I looked out the window. The street was empty again. Cars in place. Traffic lights cycling. No sign that hundreds of figures had migrated through here 8 hours ago. Except one thing. The windows of the building across the street, 3 of them on the 2nd and 3rd floors, now had curtains drawn that hadn't been drawn before. And behind one of those curtains, in the gap where the fabric didn't quite meet, I could see a shape. Standing. Motionless. Facing inward. If this is the kind of story that keeps you awake, the subscribe button is right there. But let me tell you what I decided to do next, because this is where it got worse. Day 4. I had a choice. Stay and let whatever was patrolling this building eventually decide to stop at my door instead of passing it. Or move and risk being seen. Being seen moving was the thing Wibowo had warned against. But staying felt like waiting to be collected. I chose a third option. I'd noticed that the things that returned, I'd started calling them in my head, emerged at dusk, and seemed to finish whatever they did before dawn. That gave me daylight hours with apparent safety. And I'd noticed that they seemed uninterested in vehicles. The cars on the street were undisturbed, not entered, not moved. Perhaps they didn't register static objects. Perhaps I could use that. I needed information, more than the notebook gave me. I needed to know if anyone else was alive in this city, if there was any way out past those boundaries, and what had happened on the night of March 11th. And for that, I needed to reach somewhere with better infrastructure than my apartment. Somewhere with communication equipment more powerful than a receive-only shortwave, the BMKG, the Indonesian Meteorological, Climatological, and Geophysical Agency. Their Jakarta headquarters was in Kemayoran, about 6 kilometers north of me. I'd been there twice for project meetings. Their building had serious communication arrays, satellite uplinks, HF transmitters, the works. If any signal was going in or out of this city, that was the place to do it. I drove. Daylight, windows up, moving at a steady 40 kilometers per hour, not fast enough to create urgency, not slow enough to linger. The streets were empty the way they were every day. I passed intersections, shopping malls, schools, government buildings, all intact, all empty, all waiting. The BMKG building was a white modernist structure, 5 stories, antenna arrays on the roof. The parking lot had a dozen vehicles. The front doors were locked, the first locked doors I'd encountered that I actually wanted to open. I went around the side, found a fire exit propped open with a cinder block, and went in. Inside was dark. The power here had failed. Unlike most of the city. Emergency lighting only, red-tinted, casting everything in a submarine glow. I used my flashlight. Stairwell up to the 3rd floor, where I remembered the communication offices being. The air was stale, but not foul. No bodies, no shoes. Just empty desks and dark screens. The comms room was at the end of the 3rd floor corridor. A heavy door, unlocked. Inside, banks of radio equipment, satellite terminals, monitoring screens. All dead without power. But against the far wall, a standalone HF transceiver unit with its own battery backup, a Kenwood TS89OS. I knew the model, high-end, professional, and its power indicator was lit, a small green dot in the darkness. I sat down, put on the headset, turned the dial. The receiver was alive, scanning frequencies automatically. I let it scan, watching the display cycle through bands. Static, static, static. Then, at 7.245 megahertz, the 3-pulse tone. I had transmit capability now. I could answer. I could send my own voice into whatever was broadcasting that signal. My hand hovered over the transmit button. I thought about Wibowo, how he'd signaled to me with a flashlight, and then he was gone. I thought about how the thing in the radio had breathed slowly, steadily, as if it was listening, as if it was baiting. I didn't transmit, not yet. Instead, I explored the building. On the 4th floor, I found something that changed everything. A conference room clearly used as an emergency operations center. Whiteboards covered in diagrams and handwriting. A table full of printed satellite imagery. And a wall-mounted screen connected to a still-functioning backup system, a closed-circuit display showing data that had been frozen at the moment the staff vanished. The data on that screen was a seismographic reading from the night of March 11th. But it wasn't measuring an earthquake. The waveform was wrong, too regular, too sustained, too uniform across every monitoring station simultaneously. Every sensor in the BMKG network, from Sabang to Morocco, had recorded the same signal at the same time, 23:47 on March 11th. A pulse. Not seismic in origin. Coming from below, yes, but not from the mantle. From the surface. From everywhere on the surface simultaneously. The whiteboard nearest the screen had a single phrase circled 3 times in red marker. Bukan gempa. Bukan alam. Not an earthquake, not natural. Someone in this room had figured it out. Whatever happened at 23:47 wasn't a disease, wasn't an evacuation, wasn't a government operation. It was a pulse from the earth itself, or from something in the earth that had taken every living thing in the city in a single instant. And now those things were coming back. Changed. At night. I sat in that conference room for an hour, reading the whiteboard notes, studying the satellite imagery. The photos showed Jakarta from above, taken at different times, some labeled November 3rd and December 3rd. The difference between them was invisible at first. Then I noticed. In the December 3rd images, the city's shadows were wrong. Buildings cast shadows that were too long for the stated time of day. And they all pointed the same direction inward, toward the city center. As if the light source illuminating Jakarta was no longer the sun, but something beneath. I had to get back before dark. I took photos of the whiteboards with my phone's camera. I took the satellite printouts. I left the transceiver alone, didn't transmit, didn't answer the 3-pulse tone. And I drove back. On the way, I stopped at a hardware store, picked up heavy chain and padlocks, steel sheeting, a battery-powered drill. Whatever was patrolling at night was testing doors. I was going to make mine impossible to open from outside, back at my building by 4. 3 hours until dark. I spent them fortifying, chained the door, drilled steel sheeting across the inside of the door frame, blocked the windows with furniture, made my apartment into a vault. Biscuit watched from the kitchen table, sitting next to the model ship, batting at a gun turret sprue. That night, the patrol came again. The dragging sound. 8 circuits. But this time, on the 6th circuit, it stopped at my door. Not a test of the handle this time, just stopped. Silence on the other side of the chain and steel and barricade. I could feel presence the way you feel heat from a fire without seeing the flame. Something was standing there, separated from me by 5 centimeters of reinforced door, and it was still. Then a sound. A voice. In Indonesian, soft, polite, the way a neighbor might speak through a door. Pak Crosby, apakah Anda di dalam? Mr. Crosby, are you inside? It knew my name. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The voice again. Kami tahu Anda di sini. Tidak apa-apa. Anda bisa keluar. We know you're here. It's all right. You can come out. The same tone a receptionist uses. Pleasant, professional, empty. Silence for 1 minute. Then the dragging sound resumed, moving away. The patrol continued. 2 more circuits, then dawn. Day 5. I didn't go back to the BMKG. I was afraid that leaving my building would confirm my presence to whatever was tracking me. They already knew they'd said my name, but something in me believed that staying still, staying inside, refusing to respond, might buy time. Prey instincts. Freeze and hope the predator loses interest. I spent the day reviewing Wibowo's notebook again. There was a 3rd page I'd skimmed before. Now I read it carefully. It was less coherent written, I think, in the final hours before he disappeared. They are building something, in the center, Mona's area, at night. I can see from my window. The monument is changing, growing. The shapes work on it after midnight. They carry material from somewhere underground. Hundreds of them working in silence. Whatever they were before, they serve a different purpose now. Mona's, Merdeka Square, the National Monument, where I'd sat on a bench on day 1, alone in the park, trembling too badly to open a water bottle. They were building something at the monument, and I'd been there, in daylight, walked right through their construction site without knowing it. Whatever they did at night was invisible in the day, or reversed, or hidden. The monument had looked normal when I'd seen it. White marble obelisk, gold flame on top, same as always. But Wibowo had watched from his 22nd floor window. He'd had the height to see. And from my 14th floor, looking in the right direction, so could I. I waited for nightfall. This time, I didn't hide. I stood at my window lights off, curtain cracked 1 centimeter, and looked south toward Merdeka Square, 4 kilometers away. At this distance, on a clear night, I could see the monument's silhouette against the glow of the city. At midnight, I saw what Wibowo had described. The monument was taller, not by a small amount. It had grown or been extended by what I estimated as 20 meters. The proportions were wrong, the shape elongated. And at its peak, where the gold flame should have been, something else sat. Something that pulsed. A low, organic rhythm of light, amber and deep red, like a heartbeat made visible. Around its base, I could see movement. Hundreds of figures. The returned. Working, carrying, building. All in silence. All in that slow, deliberate motion, constructing something that I could not understand. I watched for 2 hours. The thing at the top of the monument pulsed steadily 3 beats, pause, 3 beats, pause. The same rhythm as the radio signal. The monument was the transmitter. Whatever had taken the population and sent the pulse through the earth was building itself a body at the center of this city. And the returned weren't dead, weren't replaced. They were labor. Drones serving a function they'd been converted to fulfill when the pulse took them. And I was the one who'd been missed. Maybe because I was on the 14th floor. Maybe because of some quirk of the building's construction I'd noticed years ago that my apartment sat above a structural void, a ventilation channel between floors 12 and 14 that the builders had left for airflow. Maybe that gap had shielded me the way a lead lining shields from radiation. I don't know. I'll probably never know. What I knew was that they were aware of me now. They'd come to my door, said my name, and they were patient. They hadn't forced entry, hadn't broken down the door. They were waiting. For what? Day 6. I made my decision. I couldn't leave the city the boundaries held. I couldn't hide indefinitely. They knew where I was. I couldn't communicate with the outside. Every signal was captured by whatever the monument had become. And every night it grew taller, pulsed stronger, and the things serving it came closer to simply waiting me out. But I still had the BMKG transceiver. I hadn't transmitted on it. And the 3-pulse signal, the monument's own broadcast, was going out on 7.245 megahertz, which meant that frequency was open, active, being monitored by something, either the structure itself or whatever intelligence directed it. Here's what I understood as an engineer. Transmitters broadcast, but they also have receive sensitivity on their own frequency. If I transmitted on 7.245, I wouldn't be reaching the outside world. I'd be talking directly to the monument, to whatever had colonized this city. And here's what I understood as a man who'd spent 6 years building water systems in a country that wasn't his, who'd never finished a model ship or a marriage, who'd kept a cat because a cat was the only commitment he could manage, without failing at it. I was going to die in this city, not dramatically, not heroically. Slowly, the way a bulb dims. They'd wait, and I'd run out of food, or water, or nerve. Or I'd sleep too deeply one night and wake up standing in the street, facing inward. Not myself anymore. Unless I did something first, day 7. I drove to the BMKG at dawn. I brought everything, Biscuit in her carrier on the passenger seat, the notebook, the satellite photos. I left the model ship on the kitchen table, unfinished, because some things don't get finished, and that has to be all right. The building was as I'd left it. Red emergency lights, stale air, the transceiver, its green power dot steady. I sat down, put on the headset, tuned to 7.245. The 3-pulse tone filled my ears. Steady, mechanical, patient. I pressed transmit. "This is Crosby Hale," I said. "Australian national, infrastructure consultant, resident of Sempakaputi, Central Jakarta. I am alive, I am unchanged, and I am not coming out." I released the button. The tone continued, unchanged. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause. Then it stopped. Silence on the frequency. Complete silence. For 10 seconds. 20. 30. Then a voice. Not the polite voice from my door. Different, deeper, older. Speaking English with no accent at all, the kind of English that sounds like it was learned from a textbook 1,000 years ago and practiced until it was flawless. "We know," it said. "We have been waiting for you to speak." "What are you?" I asked. "We are what was here before you built your city above us. We are what has always been below. You built 10 million lives on top of our sleep, and when we woke, we reclaimed what was ours. Not the concrete, not the glass, the bodies, the minds, the labor. You took them. We invited them. The pulse was an invitation. They accepted, all of them, in an instant, willingly. Every mind in this city said yes to the pulse, because we offered them peace from the noise of being human. You were the only one who did not hear the invitation. Shielded, sleeping in your void between floors. An accident. What do you want from me? A pause, longer than the others. Nothing. You are an error. Errors resolve themselves. You will sleep eventually. When you sleep, you will hear us. And you will say yes, because everyone does. The invitation is beautiful. The peace is real. The noise of being yourself will end. And you will join the work. And the work is holy. I sat in that chair with the headset on and the transmit button under my thumb. and I thought about noise. The noise of being human. The noise of 6 years in a foreign city, of a marriage that dissolved because I couldn't be present enough, of a model ship I never finished because finishing things meant confronting the quiet that came after. I'd been running from quiet my whole life. And now, something was offering me the ultimate quiet, the end of self, the end of noise, the joining of a collective purpose that required nothing of me except surrender. And part of me wanted to say yes. That's the truth I don't think anyone would admit. That in the moment, with the offer on the table, some deep, exhausted part of me leaned toward it the way you lean toward sleep after days awake. But I looked at Biscuit in her carrier. She was watching me through the mesh. Green eyes, alert, alive, unchanged. She hadn't heard the pulse either. She hadn't said yes. And she needed me to open the door of that carrier every morning and put food in her bowl. Because that's what living things do. They persist for each other. Even when persisting is loud and painful and unfinished. No, I said into the microphone. I don't accept. Silence. Then the voice. Then you will be the last noise in a quiet city. And eventually, the quiet will take you anyway. Not by force, by erosion. Sleep well, Crosby Hale. The tone resumed. 3 pulses, pause. The conversation was over. I drove back to my building. It was noon. The sun was high and the city was empty and beautiful and wrong. I parked in the basement, carried Biscuit upstairs, fed her, drank water, sat at my kitchen table. The model ship was there. HMAS Sydney. Half-built, hull together, superstructure partially assembled, gun turret still on the sprue. I picked up the modeling knife, picked up the first turret piece, cut it free from the plastic frame. I'm still here. Day 19 now. The patrols still come at night. The voice at my door still asks, politely, if I'd like to come out. The monument grows taller. I can see it from my window, pulsing that amber heartbeat against the clouds. The city runs itself. Power stays on. Water flows. The returned work in silence. I don't sleep, not fully. I doze in 20-minute intervals, setting a timer on my phone, jolting awake before I can sink deep enough to hear anything. It's destroying me. I know it's not sustainable. I know the voice on the radio was right. Erosion will take me eventually. You can't stay awake forever. But here's what I've discovered. The model ship takes focus. Precise, demanding focus. The pieces are tiny. The glue has to set before you move on. The painting requires steady hands and clear eyes. It's the most noise-generating activity I know, the opposite of peace, the opposite of quiet. It demands that I remain myself, annoyed at my shaking hands, frustrated at crooked decals, present in every irritating specific second. I'm on the mast assembly now. Tiny radar dishes and antenna arrays, each one the size of a grain of rice. I work by daylight at the kitchen table. Biscuit sits beside me, watching, occasionally batting a piece onto the floor, so I have to crawl under the table to retrieve it. I don't know if anyone will ever hear this. I recorded it onto my phone's voice memo. And tomorrow I'm going to drive back to the BMKG and try to transmit it on a different frequency, not 7.245, not the Monument's channel, but something higher, something aimed at the sky, at satellites that might still be listening. Maybe it gets out. Maybe it doesn't. If it does, if you're hearing this, don't come to Jakarta. Don't send rescue. Don't send soldiers or scientists or anyone with a mind that can be invited. Whatever is below this city is patient and old, and it considers what it offers to be kindness. It probably is kindness from its perspective. An end to the noise of being human, An end to unfinished things and failed marriages and 6 years of not quite going home. But I'm not done with the noise yet. The mast section has 43 individual pieces, and I haven't started the rigging. Biscuit needs her morning food. And somewhere in a drawer I have the paint for the deck Tamiya XF78. Wooden deck tan that I've been saving for when the hull is ready. The hull is almost ready. I'm going to finish this ship. And as long as I'm building it, I'm going to stay awake. And as long as I stay awake, I'm going to remain the last noise in a quiet city. The last living person in a city of 10 million. The last one who said no.